Loud was the sounding of destiny's call for those with the wisdom to hear. Far ranged the folk of the northernmost reach, who wielded the pen and the blade. Eager were they for what elders could teach, and fair were the treasures they made. Tempting the sounds of the siren's sweet call that lure men away from the ring, but meager their power o'er the star of the north, when the southern folk crowned as their king. Back in the mists of time. Back in the mists of time. Before you.
So,
Certainly before me.
Ealdormere, at that point, there were three kingdoms. There was the kingdom of the west, the kingdom of the east, and originally the kingdom of the middle. And the Midwest states in Ontario, all the way down to Kentucky and all the way west to Minnesota were part of the Middle Kingdom. And there was no Ealdormere to speak of. And Duke Finbar d'État, who was at that point Count Finbar d'État, he's got an old guy.
Hey.
Hi, Elga.
We're good.
Yeah. Count Finbar d'État moved to Ontario, and he founded the first group, which was Echoing, which was Toronto. And the song talks about following the Northern Star. His coat of arms has a six-pointed star on it. And he came to Ealdormere, and he founded the first group.
Exactly. And the citadel on the banks of the Mere is Echoing, which is the city of Toronto. Pilgrims departed to settle new fiefs, and the land of the trillium thrived. United they were with their many beliefs, and the Bruin and Hare came alive. Swift grew the man known as Falkenholm's friend, who would crown the white rose as his queen. Slighted was she by the jewels of the south, ever was duller their sheen. Up leapt the spark that ignited the reign of Septentria's flints and steel. Deep were the secrets the dwarf smith could name, and the cauldron of gold would reveal. Dear was their sister who guided the Scraels in the lands of the easterly dawn, and steep were the banks of the river of years when their duty was finally done. This is the founding of the first baronies.
So, the first barony was Septentria, and the first baroness was Baroness Gillian, and she briefly ruled over Septentria, and Septentria was all of Ontario. And they were replaced shortly thereafter by Ivan and Catherine. And if you hear any of the old-timers speak, we speak of them with great reverence. They were the Baron and Baroness of Septentria for over 10 years. And from the Barony of Septentria, Enid Aurelia of the Tin Isles went and formed the Barony of Skraling-Althing, which was the Ottawa Reborn. I see we have some Skraels in the back. And so everything came from Septentria. I like to refer to everybody from any barony. If you scratch the surface, you'll find a Septentrian underneath.
So we have the Bruin, the bear, of course, is Septentria's heraldry, and the hare from the Skraling-Althing roots, and the lands of the easterly dawn are the second barony, which would be the Skraling-Althing. Strong is the pull of a name for your home, and a heritage that all can share. Fated were they who would carry the name and the weight of a champion's steel. Old was the wisdom the bard had once shown, who had found in the land of the hare. Thoughtful the moot, and the future they saw, and the hope they agreed to declare. And bold in the pattern on history's loom were the threads they were measuring there. So spread the dream like a hungering flame over Ealdormere's towns and fields. Fated were they who would carry the name and the weight of a champion's steel. Thoughtful the symbols in copper and hide that encircled their necks like a wreath. And great was their promise as Ealdormere's pride, but their stewardship doomed to be brief.
So, in the far reaches of Ealdormere, the king and queen of the Middle Kingdom did not visit us often. And our only stewards were the barons and baronesses up here. And there was a thought, an idea, to have a champion for the region of Ealdormere. And so they arranged a tournament. And to enter in the tournament, you needed 12 people of good repute to vouch for you to enter in. No? Well, you were there. You tell us.
You had to have an AOA, or if you did not, you had to have 12 ambiguous people vouch for you.
And it was hard to get an AOA back then because the king and queen seldom visited.
It wasn't that bad. But
Now, the winner of that tournament was Yog, and Honora was his consort. And there were collars made, and they're still used. They are the oldest regalia of our kingdom. You will see their brown leather collars with brass plaques, and they have symbols. The champion's collar has a symbol of swords, and the consort's collar, which is now the queen's champion's collar, has the symbols of grain and arts and sciences.
Question. Do you know if anyone has a list of who entered that tournament?
I wish we did.
Yeah.
Did you enter in that tournament?
I came second.
Fabulous!
So close.
So you can tell us about this in the tournament.
Well, I remember some of people. I think Jordan was in it.
Very possibly.
Alasdair Razi was in it.
Oh, yeah.
But yes, it is like 40 some odd years ago. But it was held in the Toronto Commons. It was a beautiful site.
Oh, I love that site.
Is that at the University of Toronto?
Yeah.
With that beautiful walkway up the.
We held a lot of events there.
It was a great site, and yes, it was a fun tournament, and yes, and it was kind of amusing because Young and I both were from Ben Dunsworth, and he started a little after I did, but about the same, and we were kind of perpetual rivals. It was just up and coming because at that time most of the Ephort fighters had kind of disappeared. And there wasn't any fighting going on except in Ben Dunsworth and Walthingale. That was sort of it. There was one, Mordain was out in the east. No, he was gone.
I think he was shipped off.
He was shipped off for a while. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of fighting. So it was kind of neat. It was kind of the first big tournament that we had. But yeah, didn't turn out well.
Do you remember how the collars were bestowed? Did they take them themselves, Yog and Honora, and did they give them to each other or anything like that? It's back. I'm putting you on the spot.
That's fine. Actually, I'm pretty sure that Yog took them from Iden Kappa, and he took his and then Honora's, but yeah, I think that was the way it went.
A warlord arose in the far southern land that spoke of a northern threat. Artless the fall of his ironclad hand and the terms of their servitude set. Heavy the heart of that conqueror's son that the northerners knew as a friend, and dark were the skies of a gathering storm when he told them their freedom would end. So bitter the time of the unspoken name and the rule of a distant king. Cold were the hearts of the winter-bound folk as they argued what tribute to bring. Laughing the tide, laughing the fires of the metalsmith's forge, and the memories of those who recall. And bold was the flight, bold was the face of the deep-hidden flower that bloomed in the conqueror's hall.
So the king of the middle was King Aelin. And the Middle Kingdom was divided into regions: Pentamere, Oaken, Flame, and Ealdormere. And they were regions. And they heard about the championship tournament and that we had champions. And he thought we were a little out of line. And he said that there would be no region of Ealdormere. So he sent Palomar, who was the prince, to Ice Dragon, an event not even in the kingdom, to gather all the Ealdormereans into the room and say, you can't do this anymore. You are not Ealdormere. As you can imagine, it went over very poorly. Now, shortly thereafter, Szilard, metalsmith, thought it would be an interesting idea to make a gift of crowns to the Middle Kingdom that they're still used to this day. They're plaque crowns. You can even see pictures of them. The most recent king of the Middle wore them at the recent event. And they have large gems on them. And underneath all those gems are trilliums. There might have been some spite. And in the Pensic following that, Ealdormere was very angry. And we couldn't use the word Ealdormere, so the war cry was all the beer. Did I miss anything?
A little bit.
That's why you're here.
There's also more, not just the trilliums and the crowns, there's also a special stitching was created with wolves made.
Yeah.
In the bag that carries the box that carries the crowns, yes.
So, it really stemmed from the kingdom being very big, and we felt we were being ignored. So that's the rise to the region of Ontario, and then we call ourselves Ealdormere. But it really went back a little further than that, because during war, the king would say, Pensier, what do you got? Okay, what have you got? On Ealdormere, we didn't have that many fighters. And so we were kind of looked down upon. We didn't like it. So Ohio and us, we did not play nicely. And so when Ellen was from Ohio, King Senator from Ohio, I think the Marshal was, anyway, so they had a Ohio meeting.
A washroom curia.
Yeah, and banned Ealdormere. Although we also did that war, we had a few makers made ELO pins.
Oh, I have a yellow.
You have one?
The Ealdormere Liberation Organization.
So it was a lot of fun.
The mid-realm did not find that funny, and they have no sense of humor that they are aware of.
Come on in, there's more seats.
But anyway, so it was kind of tense that first year.
Somebody also had a shield with 3 bosses.
That looked like
It resembled His Majesty and his Seneschal, and
Oh,
I don't remember who else.
They had put faces on them that looked a little like the current royals. Oh my.
Ouch.
Yeah, because I don't think that trillion was a thing until my brother-in-law, who was in art school at the time, was making the device for the New Kingdom, which is a little further along in the story. But he made 15 wolves and 1 trillium, and people would vote for their favorite wolf. And so the wolves didn't, any particular wolf didn't get a vote, but the trillium did. That's why it was trillium instead of wolf.
Yeah, well, because we're trilliums.
They were
That's true, that's very true.
But it wasn't on the Herald. Then with the heat came the summons to war, and they followed the warlord's son. Proudly they shouldered the burdens they bore, and the praise for the battles they won. Silent those war cries, tongueless those bards, as they toiled in the sand and the mud, and loudly their discipline spoke of the land, and whispered its name in their blood. Still there were 2 who embodied the North, champions in all but name. Low burned the embers of Ealdormere's hearth, and the seeds of a slumbering flame. Moved by her courage, they fought for the dough, and proudly they stood in her guard. Slow went that harvest, and small was its yield, for many that winter was hard.
So the dough was Iceland, Queen Iceland, because at that point, Aelin had moved on, and Iceland was the queen, and she was suffering from.
Palomar and Iceland.
Yes, Palomar was the king,
Yeah,
and
Palomar.
Iceland was his queen.
And Iceland was dying of cancer. And everybody, that year, everybody fought for Iceland. Everybody. and Trumbrand was there, fighting in the Queen's Guard. And if you go to Pennsic, the hill that's overlooking the battlefield is called Mount Heisling, after her.
Are there other stories? I see giggles in the back here.
There's a little, well, the Borzakis were an interkingdom household at the time, and when we said we wanted to balance things out, so that we wore Iceland's favors, but we fought for the East.
But you were her favors, as most people
We were
did.
favors, yes, but they asked us to balance things out, and I gotta say, we did get some fighting.
Word from the south rode the heels of the spring with news of a tourney won. Many did wonder what summer would bring when the conqueror's dynasty done. Solemn, the dragon proclaimed in his court that the law of the land should read hence, that any who challenged the name of the North would answer the steel of a prince.
So that was Talamar, not Palomar, Talamar. He basically referred to Ealdormere in court, and people were like, whoa. And he said, what the king can take away, the king can give back.
And this was Talamar.
Talamar.
I get the two confused.
And Talamar has come to our kingdom to visit us. Most recently, when Quilliam and Tangwhistle were king and queen, he was at the coronation. He was the nice man who bought all the items.
And
Yes,
And
very
Palomar won a crown tournament just so he could set Ealdormere free.
Yes. Yeah. And that was the time, the fairly brief couple of years when Ealdormere was a place again on the books, but also we had a prince for the very first time, in that the crown prince of the Midrealm and the crown princess of the Midrealm would henceforth be officially known as the prince and princess, the crown prince and the crown princess of Ealdormere.
There was a charter. There was a charter drawn up to declare Ealdormere a crown principality. So it was a principality without its own prince and princess as part of the Middle Kingdom, and they said the prince and princess of the Midrealm would also be the prince and princess of Ealdormere, much like the prince and princess of England are also the prince and princess of Wales. And it laid out in the charter the Lord and Lady Lieutenant, who were Iden, the Baron of Septentria, and Enid, the Baroness of Scoil and Althing. And they were charged with taking Ealdormere forward to make it a principality of its own.
Yes, they created a great council. And
Yes.
it was all the peers, there wasn't many of us, Baroness, and yeah, it was, that's where we picked up, all those symbols and stuff, that's where it was all created, it was just, and the laws and stuff. The first prince was, I think, Renard and Brunhilde.
Reynard and Brunhilde.
were the first.
There was one before that.
They were second.
They were second? Who was
Because
Yeah, you got it memorized.
Yeah, but we never, I hear the bards are silent about it.
Time of the unspoken.
Yeah, Corwin.
Yeah.
Of who the bards are silent.
It's true.
And shadow the distance.
That's right.
So was the title of Ealdormere's lord assumed by the southern king. Great was the voice of the wolves of the north, who were given the freedom to sing. White were the blooms of the trillium flower that bloomed in the whispering wood. They gathered and raised in their arms, and scarlet the bonfires that burned through the night were seen from all cities and farms. Also that spring saw the waters arise and shoulder a barony's share. Jeweled the cup that was served by the wise, who would counsel their people with care. Steadfast the princes who hailed from the south, but brief would that mantle be worn. Ruled by the spinning of destiny's thread, they would soon have a northerner born. The last of the southern, the otter and briar, saw Ealdormere prove its worth. Sagely they called for a tournament grand to determine the prince of the north. A new knight defeated the champion of old, with prowess both nimble and sure, and certain were they upon seeing his face that the line of the north was secure.
So the otter and briar were Tadashi and Palomar.
Ariadne.
No, and the bride. Oh, yes.
Well, yes, but also.
And then also Palomar.
And also Palomar.
Yeah. And we had a coronet tournament. It was held in Bernard-Twinog on April 4th, 1990. I was there for that. I was washing dishes in the kitchen. If you've seen our Terrat events, he was also there. He had to read out all the principality laws in court. We were done the dishes by the time he was done. And in the tournament, there were how many people that entered Belgar? Like a lot.
30 or something.
There was a lot.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, it was.
And it would, the finals were David Martin Failsworth, our first prince, and Jan.
Who had been that first champion with the leather and copper collar.
Yeah.
And so David Martin Failsworth became the first.
David and Tengwhistle.
No, David and Alina.
No, David and Tengwhistle. David and Tengwhistle.
I apologize, David and Tengwhistle, who has since reigned as, she has since reigned as Ealdormere's queen.
And she's back.
And she's
Yep.
back.
Yep,
She is, but anyway, she moved west, she's coming back anyways. Tengwhistle is an absolutely delightful lady, should you ever have the opportunity to
She's
chat.
awesome, yeah.
Valver, you fighting it?
I did not.
You didn't fight it?
No, I was newly married.
Because I did.
No, it's just the whole,
You give it a whirl.
if you win a tournament, you have to be prince and that.
Dude, I was 20.
It was, that's,
And back then, we had the first few coronet tournaments. They went, "You won. You're the prince. Go."
I mean, no, 21,
There was no
I think
break.
that's 21, I think it is.
Yeah.
First year.
Yes, Rock won the fourth coronet tournament.
You did.
I was 23 then. 23.
Back to David. For tall stood Prince with the grace of a stag and beheld at the heart of a courtier born. Steady the gaze of the evening swan, who first lit the skies of the north. Together they stood for the peace of the land, and prosperity followed their reign. Heavy the cloak they were given to wear, the gold in the hem of its train. So Ealdormere's wolves took their place in the world where the falcons had once their roost. Scarlet would march with the purple and gold when the arrows of battle were loosed. Precious the gifts wrought of silver and song that were given as pledges sincere. Twinned were the spirits of Ealdormere's throng with the warriors of far Callantir.
So Callantir was the first principality of the Middle Kingdom, and it was Kansas and those states down there. And their splitting off from the Middle Kingdom was tumultuous. And Ealdormere bore the emotional baggage of, oh God, not again. So there was a lot of friction that we didn't cause, but they're like, oh, we're gonna have another principality. So there were people in the Middle Kingdom who were like, what are you doing? What's going on? And we got a lot of scrutiny. And now the interesting thing, and I don't think I'm jumping ahead here, is so the king or the queen of the Middle Kingdom would come to supervise our coronet tournaments and invest the prince and princess by putting the coronets on their head. And then after 5 or 6 coronets, we had an investiture. So the king and queen would come up to Ealdormere to watch the tournament, and then come back 3 months later and go, okay, now you're the prince and princess. So the king and queen of the Middle Kingdom were coming here all the time. And the Middle Kingdom was a very formal place. And they could come up to Ealdormere and go to parties and hang out. And no one was like fawning on them. They're like, we don't like this place. And we got more attention than we probably should have. And a lot of the kings and queens really loved coming up here because we weren't standing on protocol.
Singing they joined in the thundering hosts that fought for the mid-realm kings. Fearless the might of the wolf pack at war with the valor that leadership brings. Sharp were the blades of the triple-edged flower that struck its foes down where they stood, and fierce was the light of the heaven's red eye when the fields were the scarlet of blood. Brilliant the warrior watched from the sky, with the pride in her gaze was felt. Bright would the princes and princesses shine, like the points of the stars in her belt. Warm was the frolicking zephyr of change that traded old faces for new. Right was the day when an honor was done and the white rose was given her due.
Now, the white rose, you're referring to Caitlin? Okay. So, in the Middle Kingdom, they had the Order of the Rose. And the Order of the Rose was like a peerage. And the queen was not automatically entered into it. And there were three queens in the history of Ealdormere that were, in the history of the Middle Kingdom that were not inducted into the Order of the Rose. It was fairly controversial. One was Caitlin Stewart, who was a duchess. Countess at that time. And Hugo von Feverklippe, who was also from Ealdormere, was her king, way back in the distant of time. One was Shauna the Distant, and I don't remember who the third one was. So Comar and Lisa, who were the king and queen of the Middle Kingdom, came to Ealdormere and said, right, we're going to fix this. And they changed their kingdom law to make the Order of the Rose automatic. And our kingdom has it automatic as well, because we wouldn't want to be like that. And they called these people forth. And Caitlin came out having not played in years. She had to borrow a coronet and a cloak from Finvar. And she was recognized and she felt appreciated and she started playing again from that day forward.
Yeah, she started coming back out when we were kids.
Yes.
Just a new person come back and well, yeah, shortly after that is when Omar was.
Yeah, we ended up, I as a young bard in the society, I started singing here in these hallowed halls, not this one in particular, but 19 years old, always musical, always interested in the Middle Ages and Renaissance, but suddenly I found my people, as I'm sure many of you are sort of feeling at the moment. And one of the first songs that I wrote was a song called White Rose, which talks of a queen of the humans who asks the elves and the vampires and all the creatures of the world to step back and let humans be ascendant in the world for the rest of history. And that was part of the reason that Caitlin was denied the order, is that back in the day, there was a strong contingent of people who wanted to be from Lothlorien, from Tolkien. They wanted to arrive with their ears, their elf ears and vampire fangs, and there was a very strong fantasy element to the SCA. And Caitlin, as a young woman, took counsel, but she decided that this was a historical group, and so for the duration of her reign as a young queen, people with those personas should adopt a human persona that might have existed in the time period that we study. And that was, again, hugely controversial and a large reason why at the end of her reign, the word came out that she would be denied the Order of the Rose, and many people agreed and many people did not agree. And as she was sitting in the thrones, upon the thrones of the Midrealm for the last day, as she was about to step down, throughout that event, people had very quietly gathered red roses and passed them out amongst the populace. And so, just quietly, not in a court or anything, random people would come up to the queen, bow, and offer her a rose as a commentary that they appreciated so much service that she did. And it was said that many who were human counterparts of what would have been elves and vampires, so those people who had decided to step forward to be part of that human world, they had white roses and they laid them at her feet as well, because she had earned it as queen. And so the day, many, many decades later, when they decided that she should be there, she was inducted, and I sang that for her, and she wrote me a note afterwards. She had been very graceful the day of, and she wrote me a note afterward, and it arrived by post, and she said, I wanted to let you know that I went home and I cried. And I cried for the first time since that day when I was denied the order, because I had sworn that morning that I would never let them see how much it hurt me. And with that justice done, and with the song that I created for her and we all sang together in Ealdormere for her, she had felt that ease, and she wanted to thank us all for healing that old wound.
And you were new at that time.
I was.
So when she was queen, that was Hugo. So that'd be like Late
80s.
70s?
Yeah,
Late
early
70s.
Early 80s,
Yeah.
yeah.
So-
I think 80s was the
I would
Pensic
remember.
portion.
So the SCA in its early days in the Middle Kingdom, they would actually have events at science fiction conventions, and you know, like 1990 or 1991, the Society finally went, okay, you can't register elven names. I'm sorry. We still have a couple people who play who have elven names.
Yes, exactly.
My favorite, though, is going to Pensic, and of course people are running around in elf ears. And Master Tarkatai was sitting in camp, and some people with elf ears walked by. He's like, hey, I left my shoes out last night. They're still not fixed.
This is Master Tarkatai who
Yeah.
came around the corner during court in order to invest the world. The wise Calantiri gave Ealdormere's bards the test of a verse to sing, and so did the war prince receive for their words a weapon more fit for a king. Deeper the friendships within and without, though challenge and contest were rife. The ram and the tower stood forth from the shires, and the baronies now numbered 5. You all know the ram and the tower. And our last two, Redstave and Ben Dunford, became our last ones. Upon this foundation their arms would reach wide, and the North Realm would leave its mark. Powerful monarchs would sail with the tide, and would shine like a flame in the dark. Ealdormere's people were giving and kind, each head of pavilion or hall had no greater pride for a stranger or friend, but to give them their best and their all. So Ealdormere grew to a thoroughbred strength from the first eager steps of a colt. The needs of a kingdom were pondered at length, and none could find Ealdormere's fault. Officers, artisans, wisdom and youth, and nobles of every degree, women and men full of chivalry's grace, who could lead them in war and in peace.
So, Ealdormere had been a principality for a number of years. And through the years, we were like, we want to be a kingdom. No, you can't be a kingdom. We want to be a kingdom. No, you can't be a kingdom. We want to be a kingdom. Get out. What? Mordain went to have a meeting with the Curia of the Middle Kingdom at Pensic when he was just stepping down as prince, I believe. And they were like, okay, it's time for you to go. We had enough members. We had enough members of each peerage. We certainly had national pride. We have never lacked for that. And we started, and of course, we're Canadians, so we formed committees. We had a laws committee, and an awards committee, and a ceremonies committee. And then we had a first king and queen. They went, that's nice, we're going to do what we want. It was awesome. But we started moving towards becoming a kingdom and splitting off from the Mid-Realm.
And that's about 1997. By 1998, we had our
our first coronation. We had a crown tournament, and poor Barris and Marian were the last prince and princess of Ealdormere, but we already had heirs without any crowns, who were David and Alina,
Yes.
who were going to be our first king and queen. And we went kingdom at our first coronation on October 26, 1998. It was hosted by Ben Dunford, and over 1,000 people were at that event.
all over the world. They were thrilled.
Troll line went out for her.
We had 4 troll lines. We got everyone in that site in an hour and a half. And my job was to intimidate anyone who held up the line. I know that's funny, but I did. It worked.
And I have another song called Stone Soup, the demands of the feast. Hundreds more people than we had thought would come. And the demands of the feast, of course, the plans were not for that great a number, and yet everyone helped. Everyone took a turn in the kitchen, and by the time that it was ready, we were able to feed 325 of them.
Wilhelm Cameron von Holstein was the feastocrat, and everybody dove in the kitchen. Everyone.
And it was a huge success. And again, Ealdormere, we all lend a hand. The oldest of councils held court in the west, and as law was their word of assent. Respectful the terms of the North Realm's request, and its finest ambassadors sent. Deeply the elders considered their suit, and the wind brought the breathless report. And joyful the bell song that pealed through the land with the voice of the council's support. Like bees in the summer, the fever took hold, for much was there yet to be done. The newest of nobles joined shire folk of old in their dreams of a future to come. The humblest peasant stood equal to peer, and the shape of their work was revealed. Surely the mightiest keep had been built from the stones that were found in the field. And so came the day when the doors were thrown wide to that wondrous hall they built. Drawn like a river, they gathered inside till the greatest of chambers was filled. Eyes were drawn upward and whispers were hushed at the sight of a scarlet draped throne. Their dream in fruition, the moment at hand for a king and a queen of their own. Do you remember that day?
I was the autocrat.
I
Really remember that. So the best part was, our biggest stress was getting 1,000 people through Troll in an hour and a half. So we were like,
Actually, the biggest problem was all the people who had pre-regged were, the line was long for the people who pre-regged because it was harder to get names, we had to find their names because we didn't,
Right,
paper.
yeah.
And it was taking them longer, so we had people leaving that line, getting in line, and paying a second time so they wouldn't have to be in line again.
yeah, and we're like, go, 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 go. And
So
the
we were
almost
getting
the
faster who were just showing up.
And almost the entire day was court. Because the last king of the Middle Kingdom who came up, who was Palomar, which worked out really well.
No,
passed.
that was Dog.
There was
Dog.
Dog.
Dog? No.
Dog.
Was it Dog?
Palomar
It was
presided at Crown tourney. Palomar presided at Crown.
He'd stepped down by
And Dog.
investiture.
Thank you.
Don't you remember the version 2 of the coronation ceremony?
I don't remember.
Oh,
That was-
I really remember that. So we might have been stressed on the ceremonies committee. We had written the perfect coronation, and David and Alita came in and went, that's great, we're writing our own, thanks. And Hector, who was a prolific bard of our kingdom, imagine Dan Aykroyd. He was very smarmy. And we gave me a ride home from Penzance. We're like, we're stressed because we've written this perfect ceremony that's not going to be used. So we wrote Coronation 2.0, and it was irreverent. People were rolled up in rugs and beaten.
Theoretically.
Yeah, theoretically. And the line was, and Kindred gets busy. With an axe. We felt, it was very therapeutic, we felt great afterwards. But there were 1,000 people there. And we had 4 heralds to read out all our kingdom laws for the first time. And everybody was like riding a high, and I remember I was sitting with Kerrick, and after like at 11 o'clock, everything was done that could be done, and I had a beer, and Moria freaked out. She's like, why are you relaxing? And I'm like, nothing we can do now.
And from that moment onward, after those courts, we were a kingdom. We were finally the kingdom of Ealdormere after all of that.
That's right.
In the song, soft and silence, the populace stood, and the will of the land intoned. Sweet was the harvest that grew from the past, when the seeds of the future were sown. Soft was the shining of Ealdormere's eyes, who had gathered to witness a birth. And bright was the legacy circle that passed from the first to the last to the first. And so first is the wolf and the wilds and the will and the rule of the Northern King. Yeah.
One thing, I remember you standing on a table singing
Yes,
that.
I remember that too.
Yes. Standing on a table singing that.
There I was, college age, again, still absolutely terrified to be standing up in front of people, calling myself a bard. And I had written this. I talked to so many people. I talked to Nika and so many folks who remembered the old days before I had ever joined. And some people had chronicled the early days of Ealdormere, and so I was pouring through them, just feeling it come alive.
The histories of Ethelred.
The histories
Which
of
you can
Ethelred.
find online if you're Arkle or somebody who likes that kind of stuff. They were written. There were 4 volumes, and each one was written by a different person who lived through that time. So the first volume was Finbar. I believe Nika might have written one of
You wrote
those.
So
one of
we
these.
got up to 7 eventually.
Did
Yes.
you?
There are 7 of them. Yeah, I ended up doing 5 and 6. And
This is all pre-internet. We had
Yeah.
paper copies.
But Finbar's was unique because not only did it illustrate all the events, there were these charming little drawings that were part of it, that were absolutely part of it. So Hector wrote one, Lynette wrote one, Lynette, who is former Schwarzdragon Herald over in
Drachenwald?
Drachenwald.
Yep.
Who wrote the second?
I don't remember.
Robert de Tuglis did illustrations for one of them.
Robert of Two Cliffs, maybe?
What, did he write
Might have
that?
been Robert.
Yeah, I think it
He
was.
would have written it. He would have certainly drawn.
Yeah,
Tarver the Bold.
Tarver.
Tarver.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Have they all been transcribed? Are they still available?
They are still available.
I'll tell you what. If any of you are on the Ealdormere Facebook or the Ealdormere Discord, I have found them. I read them again recently. I'll find the links and I'll share them with everyone.
Are they not on the Kingdom website? I thought they were linked from there.
They might be.
For a long
I
time.
found them through the power of Google.
There was an Ealdormere history page for a very long time. Colin Stewart may have them on his page. I'm not sure if he had the very last one because that one was an interesting one to write because it covered a period where I had been out of the kingdom and then came back. And we haven't written one since, but there was also a fairly extensive one I know that Sivia did for Skraeling Althing. There were some other ones that went into it, but the Ethelred was the one that was so continuous.
Yeah. And a wonderful way to remember from, exactly, I'm right with you, Naga, but a really wonderful way to pass these stories down to those of us. I was sitting where you were sitting, and I was just falling in love with these stories and these people. Naga?
So you speak of the wolf, the wilds, and the will.
Yes.
How does all of this tie into the line of the North? And how did the line of the North tradition start?
You want to take that one?
Hector.
Hector. So Hector was a very prolific bard. We still sing his songs. And he started the line of the North.
And a good man.
A great man.
You say schmarmy, but he loved
Oh
wearing-
my God. His wife at the time hated going on road trips with us. Bravo. There's a split for 10 hours.
But yes, Master Hector was one of the ones that absolutely brought Ealdormere to life in my heart.
Absolutely.
So yes, a
He
very
was
good man.
he was
doesn't
a
play anything.
sapper and a ditch digger and a proud fighter of Ethelred.
And he wore all the plaids all at the same time.
Oh my God.
And the man that beat the entire Mid-Realm army.
So the line of the line of the North was started by Hector. I don't remember exactly when he started.
The beginning of the second age of Ealdormere, but I can find you that.
So Hector started it, and then he drifted away from the SCA because he had an attack of life. And we turned to his apprentice Garrett and said, Garrett, take up the line of the North. And he's like, I'm not touching that. And then we turned to his other apprentice Paleo and said, Paleo, take up the line of the North. And he said, I'm not touching that. And I finally said, okay, I'm the old guy, I'll take that.